But, it does speak to like those bigger things of like life may, and for listeners, like life may feel ho-hum right now, or you might feel underwater. You might feel overwhelmed, spread too thin, exhausted, like over it, fed up, upset, angry, sorrowful, regretful. And we all go through phases like that. Sometimes they're long phases, but anything can change.
Hello, and welcome to the How to Take Care of Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Wolff-Casey, and I am absolutely thrilled that you're here. I actually want to take a moment just to pat you on the back, friend. You're taking time out of your busy day, and I know you could choose to listen to all sorts of other things, but you have decided to listen to something that has the potential to change your life, even if it's in some small way. It's something to really be proud of, that you've made the choice to do something to better yourself. And I have to say, you've picked a great episode to tune into. Today, I am talking to none other than Larissa Hall Carlson, who was a dear friend of mine at my time at Kripalu. She was one of my teachers, one of my first Ayurvedic teachers. And I actually got to sit down and talk to her all about what makes her tick, what she's excited about now, and how things are moving forward for her. You'll actually get the opportunity to listen to Larissa's entire daily schedule and all the little habits that she uses to keep herself healthy up in the snowy wilds of Vermont. You'll also get to hear some tips on things like why eating well calm could potentially change your entire system of health. You'll also learn that perhaps doing something just to see if you can could potentially change your life. There's so much in today's episode, friends, and I am so excited to share it with you. So without further ado, here we go. I have the pleasure and privilege of being here with one of my first teachers of Ayurveda, and what became a very good friend when we were at Kripalu together, and just a wonderful person, an all-around good egg, Larissa Hall Carlson. She is a fairly much a luminary, we could call her, in the Ayurveda and yoga world. She's a nationally certified Ayurvedic practitioner and yoga teacher. She is also an Ayurvedic yoga specialist. She's known for her rich teachings, her exceptional knowledge, and her consummate professionalism. She is passionate about encouraging all people to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature through the time-honored teachings of the Vedic traditions. I'd love it, Larissa, if you could tell our viewers and listeners about who you are and where you are and how you came to be what you are today. So a little of your history.
Thanks, Veronica, and welcome, listeners. It's wonderful to be here with you, sharing a bit about Ayurveda and the journey of health and well-being. I am currently in snowy Vermont. It's winter here, and we're blanketed in snow, which is good for my Pitta constitution. So it keeps me balanced and harmonized to have cool weather and twinkly stars above and that deep indigo sky. That is very soothing to me. So I'm where I like to be the most, which is great. And I work from home a fair amount. I do a lot of one-on-one Ayurveda diet and lifestyle consultations through Zoom. I teach Ayurvedic yoga online weekly and do a number of workshops and such from home. But I'm a traveler, and I always have been. So the last 20 years of professional teaching in yoga, Ayurveda, and mindfulness has kept me on the road several times a month. So I run teacher trainings. I work in programs to certify Ayurvedic health counselors. I teach lots of retreats and workshops, and I love traveling too. I love it. It's kind of hard to leave the state of Vermont. It's hard to cross the borders because it's so beautiful here, and the air and the views. It's like ambrosia. It's just nectar. But I do love the rest of the world too. And so it is good to get on a plane or get in my car and take off and see communities and be with community members all over the place. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I know what you mean about, I live in rural Maine. And whenever somebody's like, I need you to travel here, I'm like, but why though? And I also, like, you love to travel, but I'm like, but Maine though, it's gorgeous. Every drive is a religious experience. Like, why would I go anywhere? So that's
except for Maine, like when we vacation, we go to Maine, and a lot of our friends in Maine, they come to Vermont,
Well, because we stay up in this crown of the country. We're like, Upper New England, it's where it's at.
It's where it's at for sure.
So that's where you are now. That's what's happening now. How did you get here? Tell us a little bit about your journey to become a yogic and Ayurvedic specialist.
Well, I was introduced to Ayurveda a little over 20 years ago, and it happened somewhat accidentally and serendipitously, of course. My mother got me a gift certificate to get a massage at Kripalu Center down in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, of course, where you and I met many years ago. And I'd never heard of Kripalu, and I'd never heard of Ayurveda. I was at that time a controller in White Plains, New York. I ran a finance department for about 6 years. I was controller, which satisfied my pitta nature very much. I also was an English teacher, certified as a high school English teacher, but I taught college English for a number of years and was department chair at that time. So, very pitta, running the finance department during the day and, teaching junior college at night, essentially. So anyway, my mother got me a gift certificate to get a massage at Kripalu, which is in the Berkshires, and that's where she lives. And so I went onto the website and I picked out what I thought was the most scrumptious thing on the menu, which ended up being an Ayurvedic treatment. It was called an Ayurvedic Udvartana Shirodhara, which is basically like it's an exfoliation massage with oils and herbal paste that's kind of like getting massaged with chunky peanut butter, to be honest. Like it's really messy, but it does the job. It really pulls toxins out. It's fantastic. So I got that along with a Shirodhara, which is a stream of warm oil on the forehead, which helps to soothe the nervous system. And it's kind of like instant meditation, really, really relaxing. So I went into the building to have that treatment. It was my first introduction to Kripalu, and I was wowed. It's in the beautiful woods overlooking a lake. It's the largest, for those who don't know it, it's the largest residential yoga center in North America. We have about 450 employees, 12 different yoga studios. We can hold about 600 guests at a time. It's a huge place. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. When I went up to have my treatments, the practitioner took my pulse, which I'd never had done when I'd gone to, spas in the past. And I filled out a little questionnaire about my doshas, which I'd never heard of, And so the treatment ended up being personalized for my needs. And the aromas and the pressure, the approach, it all landed so perfectly for me. And so I just fell in love with Ayurveda right there. And that's how so many people nowadays are introduced to Ayurveda, through spas, right? Ayurvedic treatments are showing up all around the globe in some of the highest rated spas. And so that was my way in too. And, eventually I'll speed up the story, but eventually I ended up getting a job at Kripalu. So that was a little over 20 years ago. I celebrated my 20-year anniversary this year. I began by working at the healing arts desk, which was basically, the entrance to the spa. And I sold the spa treatments. That was my job. I had to beg for it because I was highly overqualified and they kept ignoring my resume. I was like, no, listen, I've left my job in New York. I just want to be a yogi, I want to simplify my life. And so they took pity on me and let me work at the healing arts desk, But one of the big benefits was that I had to take every treatment on the menu so that I could accurately describe it to the guests. So I had my first Ayurvedic consultation and every Ayurvedic treatment on the menu. That's what I went through first. And then I started working with the original dean of the Ayurveda school, Hilary Garibaltis. And she kind of looped me in to help her with Panchakarma, which is a deep Ayurveda cleanse. So I started helping her with organizing that. And before I knew it, I was enrolled in the school myself. And I went through the Ayurvedic health counselor training at Kripalu. And from there, became the intern for the school, and then became the first assistant dean for the school, started working with Hillary directly. And then when she left, I took over as dean and left that position several years ago. And now I am faculty for the Kripalu School of Ayurveda. And along that road, I also got certified in many different styles of yoga. I have lots and lots of different certifications, but I really focus nowadays on the Ayurvedic approach to yoga and helping people to change habits and behaviors in order to live a more healthful life. So I'll pause there. That's a little download, huh? Mm-hmm.
That was great. So I knew some of that story, but I didn't know all of it. So it was really nice to hear the full story. I love what you said about how despite all the certifications and everything else you've learned, you keep coming back to the Ayurvedic method. Do you think that's because that's where the capital T truth is, or?
Absolutely. And it did feel like truth to me. And that's a sign of a wisdom tradition being a good fit, right? When we hear about it or experience aspects of it and it lands like truth, it feels natural, it feels right. And that's exactly what happened for me with Ayurveda, and certainly with yoga and mindfulness too. I see the whole world through an Ayurvedic lens. Everything that I look at, every experience that I have, every interaction and relationship, every choice is done or experienced through the lens of Ayurveda. It's like, can't go back, having seen through this lens, And so the approach to yoga is done through the Ayurvedic lens. The way I teach mindfulness is done the same way. Breath work is my passion and my specialty, and I do that through an Ayurvedic lens. And what I find is that there's so many aspects to the very rich and sophisticated and elegant system of medicine that is Ayurveda. But what really draws my attention most are the simple behaviors that support well-being. And that's really what I like to support students and clients in changing and boosting.
I completely agree. People tend to underestimate the value of these and we're talking super simple, folks, like cooking your food. Sometimes that just the simple act of not eating raw food changes everything for people. But I don't know if you run into this with your clients, but when I give my clients these simple things, they look at me like, well, that's not going to work because it's super simple. And you have to be like, well, how about you just try it if it's so simple?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's most of the Ayurvedic practices, especially the ones that create foundational health and wellness, they're really simple, but that doesn't make them easy, right? Because they require repetition. Those changes, those behaviors and habits require commitment. It requires a discipline, right? But each one is small, simple, sustainable, right? So yeah, all together, like cooking the food and doing lots of other little simple things allow for someone to change habits without it being shocking to the system, and to change habits that one keep going with for the rest of their life, so very sustainable.
Exactly. Yeah, that sustainability and consistency, those are the two parts of the equation that are what make these practices work for people, I think. And without it, we're just paying it lip service. We're not doing the quote unquote work, right? We're just kind of drive by tourist land. So speaking of all these simple rituals, these simple habits, what do you personally do? What are your fundamental rituals that you have that are I know we often talk about the seasonality of Ayurveda, but there are some things that just happen every day, no matter what, pretty much. And what are those things for you?
Well, I really do live an Ayurvedic lifestyle, so it is a kind of long list, but I'm going to simplify it. I try to live in harmony with the rhythms of the day. So I wake before sunrise and I go to bed pretty early. In the winter, that means I can go into bed at like 7 p.m. It's not bad. But essentially, I like to log a good 8 hours of sleep every night, wake up before sunrise. And in the early morning, when I wake up, I clean and care for my 5 sense organs. So kind of swooshing out the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin in various Ayurvedic ways in order to wake up feeling refreshed and clear for the day ahead. So sense care is a big deal. So that includes things like tongue scraping and using aromatherapy to wake up my mind and things like that. Every morning, I start the day looking at the weather with my own eyes and not through the phone. So getting to the window or stepping outside, which I will be doing with my dog early every morning. But I like to take in nature into the eyes, into the ears first thing in the morning, get fresh air into the lungs, and really connect with the macrocosm of nature. That's an ongoing non-negotiable, but it's one of the things that helps me start the day with clarity. I do some yoga every single morning. It starts in bed. When I wake up, I begin doing some little bed stretches, just a few minutes here and there. And then while I'm waiting for my hot water to cook and boil, I do some warm-ups for my joints and my spine, little stretches that make everything feel better. Just 5 minutes of stretching while I'm waiting for the water or waiting for the tea to steep, And that's a non-negotiable. That happens every single morning. I also each day need some time, not just connecting with nature, but really immersing myself in what nature has to provide. So I get outside for a nature walk every day, either in the park or on the golf course or in the woods. I like to be outside in nature every day for 10 minutes if that's all I have, but 45 minutes or an hour is more common. And that's a non-negotiable. So I've got to get some nature time. I'm studying Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology. And so I'm a stargazer as well. So luckily in the winter, I can do that both in the morning and at night. So I do a lot of gazing at the stars and just, it's like a free meditation, gazing up at that dark indigo sky and experiencing the vast expanse of space, which Ayurveda sees as a stable element. So it is a way of creating kind of calm stability in the mind, doing some sky gazing and star gazing. So that's pretty non-negotiable for me, a little bit of sky gazing every day. And then additionally, I eat seasonal foods. So right now, lots of warm, wet foods, lots of soups and khichdi and stews and casseroles and roasted vegetables and things like that. Yeah, yummies, all the comfort stuff. So a lot of warm, wet, soft, mushy, gooey, chewy winter foods. That's really what I favor this season. I am lucky enough to know my farmer, so I have organic local veggies that I get each week. So I'm cooking lots of sweet potatoes and yams and beets, parsnips, Brussels sprouts, and kind of all the hardy fall vegetables. I'm getting a lot of that right now, which, by the way, for listeners, is nice on the wallet because whatever is in season is in abundance and easier to get and usually on sale. So Ayurvedic eating is nice on the wallet, and that's good for folks to know. And perhaps most importantly, around the diet, I eat all of my meals seated in a relaxed way. So mindful eating is a non-negotiable for me, whether I'm at home or traveling to teach, even on the road and at the airports. Eating in a relaxed manner is actually the most important part of the Ayurvedic diet. It's more important than what we eat. It's how we eat, actually. And so eating in a mindful, relaxed way, I find, is essential for feeling good. So that's a big non-negotiable for me. And I'll say finally, actually, one of the daily non-negotiables is ending the day by reading something uplifting, something positive, or you could say sattvic. So I read from the classic texts, or I read poetry. I'm actually right now reading a fantastic book. The name is escaping me, but it's by Dr. Vasant Lad, and it's his little poetry book.
Yep.
Which I never knew existed. I only discovered it when I was taking Panchakarma this summer at the Ayurvedic Center up in Vermont, and they had a copy of it on the shelf, and I got myself a copy as well. So I've been reading Dr. Lad's poems, which are basically condensed versions of highlighted bits of information from the Vedas. And so just really, really lovely. But, I could read Robert Frost too, at night. So it could be something like that. But I just want to fill my senses with goodness from the first moment my eyes open to when my eyes close at night.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing basically it's like your whole day, right? You shared the highlights of your practices. And I love what you said about the importance of the sense organs and the importance of mindfulness around eating, because people get all hung up on the what do we do? And it's like, calm your senses and chill out when you eat. And if that's all you really did, if that's all you took away from our conversation today, that would be a lot, right? That would be a lot.
It's hugely important. And the beautiful thing is that, Ayurveda has known about mindful eating for thousands of years, and modern science is catching up, right? And so new research is showing that if we're in the fight or flight nervous system during a meal or snack, eating while watching something disturbing, listening to something that's aggressive, multitasking, and just being kind of jacked up in the sympathetic nervous system state. If we're eating in that state, the blood that normally pools in the stomach to help digest food, or pools around the stomach, the blood and energy, it actually gets sent out to the extremities and up to the head and the brain to take action. And so strength of digestibility tanks if we're in the fight or flight system, which, by the way, is not just for emergencies and crises. It's the go, 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 do nervous system. It's the nervous system that's in charge when we're eating standing up and eating on the go and eating while commuting and eating while working at the desk and things like that. So a lot of folks nowadays are unfortunately crammed for time around their meals and eating in that fight or flight state. And what that often means is that not only are they not digesting their food properly and well, it often means that they get negative side effects like acid reflux, gas and bloating, water retention, weight gain, the buildup of toxicity of ama in the system. Some folks get headaches and such from eating in that state. And for most, at the very least, folks usually experience a lack of contentment and a lack of satisfaction from the meal. So even if it's like the most perfectly, seasonal, organic, dosha balancing, perfectly spiced Ayurvedic meal, if we're eating it while stressed out, there's no way to digest it properly. That's fact. That's inarguable. And so for folks listening, I want to encourage you to kind of elbow room some space around your meals and snacks. Take your allotted lunch break and eat in a relaxed manner, Sit down, turn off the computer, turn off the news, don't multitask. Just that really requires only a few minutes. Like, how long does it really take to eat a bowl of soup or, a nice hot organic panini or something, Like, it's only going to take like 7, 8, 9 minutes, really to eat something. But so we don't really need a lot of time to do mindful eating, but we do need commitment and discipline to do it. And then that changes so much for folks, how they're digesting, how they're eliminating their energy level, the reduction of mood swings. It supports good sleep. It supports a natural daily detoxification, like right across the board. Mindful eating, I'd say that is the most important tool that I teach to clients and students. And again, just like you were saying before, like something that's very simple, it's really easy, it's free to eat mindfully, but it's not easy to begin that habit. Yeah, but it pays off big time. Weight loss too, like that's a non-negotiable for weight loss. And a lot of folks are coming to Ayurveda for supporting healthy weight too. Yeah, so it's a big one.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah, people who slow down and eat, they actually recognize when they're full. It takes about 20 minutes for your brain to catch up with your stomach. And so people, if they're eating really fast, they're going to blow past any satiety cue before they realize it. And then when they're done eating, they've eaten too much, they feel it, and there's no room for digestion when that happens. The stomach is full, so there's no room for motility. And so then they don't digest. And then if they keep doing that over and over and over again, that's what leads to this kind of feeling of being bloated and heavy and overweight and not yourself. And yeah, I'm with you. If people if mindful eating was the one habit they started, it could potentially change everything. Just speaks to the power of these simple habits.
It's so powerful. I have a lot of clients who will come to me for digestive support, right? A lot of folks who show up and have been fighting acid reflux for years, right? And they've often learned to eliminate some of the provoking foods like reducing coffee and wine and hot chili peppers and fried foods and stuff like that. So it's like they've already learned to do some of the pitta balancing or the fiery food reduction techniques, to work with acid reflux, but the acid reflux doesn't always disappear. And because it's not just because of the substance that's coming in, it's about how we're digesting the food, what's happening during the digestive process. And so oftentimes folks who are working with something as simple as like just acid reflux, they find incredible benefit and healing that comes just by eating mindfully. Like I've had folks with chronic ulcers, ulcerative colitis, all sorts of things over the, 15 plus years that I've been a practitioner. I've had clients, working with, chronic states, lots of discomfort, and the whole picture turns around, not with herbs, not with huge changes to diet, but changing how they eat. And when they can sit down and eat in a relaxed manner, what it does is it settles vata dosha, which vata is basically pulling the acid upward in the wrong direction, right? Because they're eating on the go, and that's jacking up the udana vata, right? The upward and outward energy pathway. And so if they can learn to sit down and eat in a relaxed manner without having to take up a lot of time, just sit and eat in a peaceful way, vata goes downward the way it's supposed to, and pitta plays nicely, and everything works well. And chronic conditions can just be eliminated naturally with consistent discipline. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. This is why I'm so interested in behavior change, because there are so many great things that we can do with some of the more advanced Ayurvedic practices, like different herbal remedies and things like that. But if the foundational habits aren't in place, all that stuff becomes Band-Aid. It's just Band-Aids. It's not really changing the situation. And habits and patterns and behaviors can really set one up to feel better in a natural, easy, free, no side effect way.
It's true. It's true. I think when people try to lean on Ayurvedic remedies the way they do modern medicine pharmaceuticals, it's the same. Like you can't expect anything to actually change until you change the behaviors and habits that are leading to the problem. Otherwise, like you said, it's just a Band-Aid. You haven't shifted anything. You're just covering up the tracks of the path you're on. You haven't changed your path. Right.
Right. And then and then Ayurveda isn't as effective if those foundational self-care habits and patterns aren't in place. So they're so important. what's coming into mind right now is a recent client that I have from down in Miami, and he has been working with really intense sleep apnea and really struggling with that for a few years, and playing with all the different, the nose tape and the mouth tape and the breathing apparatus and all the things. And when he came to me, he was kind of at his wit's end. And that's often what happens when people come to Ayurveda. Like they come when they have no other options or they've explored the other options. And so he came to me, not a yogi, the kind of CEO. I have a whole bunch of Miami CEOs that I work with. And he came to me with this challenge. And all we did was change when and how he was eating. So he was eating big dinners late at night. And in those dinners, lots of dairy, lots of meat, lots of heavy foods and substances. And so we've shut down food at 7 p.m. and made dinner a smaller, earlier, basically vegan meal. Sleep apnea in like under 2 weeks started to shift. And now he's off all the little tips and tricks that they have for it. It's gone. He sleeps through the night, started to drop weight. It's just amazing. I didn't even mess with his diet much at all. It was just like shut down the big meal, make it small, make it early, make it mostly vegan, and he can still have his dairy and meat at lunch, right? But dinner has to be small and early. And it changed the whole way that he sleeps, his energy levels, and kind of waking up puffy, needing coffee, like all that stuff. So something that simple, if someone's willing to like really give it a go, that can change the whole game. And that's why I love Ayurveda so much, because it's really looking at those big picture, like those are like high ticket items right there. Really simple. Yeah.
I know, it's so simple. And what you said about it being, you have to stick with it. You have to stay with it. I tell my clients all the time, there's no quick fix in Ayurveda, because we usually have to correct however long you've been indulging in habits or foods or whatever that have been causing the issue. Now, it's not going to take as long as it took to create the issue, but you have to stick with it, sometimes for 3-4 months before we see the big results that we want to see. But if you do stick with it, it will work, because without logic, there's no Ayurveda. So everything we do has a logic to it. And if you trust that logic and you follow the plan, yeah, you might need a little tweak here or there if something's not quite hitting, because sometimes we don't exactly know what's going to be the thing that does it. But if you just trust the process and stick with it, often we see these huge results. And, that case of your sleep apnea client, that's just one of thousands and thousands and thousands of the same sort of results that we see with Ayurveda.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting because Ayurveda can be done in a way that is incredibly inexpensive. It is incredibly effective, incredibly safe, and sustainable. And it does the job in a really gentle way. And with healthcare being in such a state as it is for so many folks, coming to a natural system of medicine, holistic system of medicine that is easy on the wallet and effective and feels good to practice, it feels good to live an Ayurvedic lifestyle. Maybe not at first, some of the pieces can be a little hard to reduce, but it does feel good to live this lifestyle. And so that should be encouraging for folks listening and new to Ayurveda. Like, it is a way of living, and it really is a whole lifestyle that promotes body, mind, and spirit upliftment, Yeah.
Yeah. I get a lot of clients that'll come to me and they'll say something like, I know it's not Ayurveda. And then they'll say whatever it is they're doing. And I always have to correct them. Like, there's nothing that's not Ayurveda. Like, everything is Ayurveda. The word is literally science of life. There's nothing in life where it doesn't cover. It's just whether it's effective for you, whether it's appropriate for you at whatever time and place you're doing it. And so exactly like you said, it's a whole lifestyle. It's a seasonal lifestyle, right? I wait for popcorn season every year because there's only one time a year where I can have popcorn, the spring or whatever. There's always a season for it. So, it's really about that, looking to be synergistic with the environment and the world around you.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Speaking of seasons, speaking of things changing and our progression through lives, I'm trying to be slick with my segue here. As you look towards what's on the horizon for you, what's lighting you up creatively and professionally? What new offerings or projects do you have on the horizon that you're getting super excited about?
I've been working recently with the support of perimenopause and menopause a fair amount. That's really drawn a lot of my attention. I found that it was showing up in my one-on-one sessions, and that I was working with so many different scenarios of people experiencing different stages of this big life transition, and different negative side effects or uncomfortable experiences. And so I turned what I've been working on with one-on-one clients into a course. So now I'm doing a 6-week virtual course called Sattvic Sensuality, Wholesome Libido Boosting with Ayurveda. And it is designed for the transition through perimenopause and menopause. And it's so fun. It's really fun to teach, I'll be 50 this year, and I am deep in my perimenopausal journey. I thought I was starting my first year of menopause, and then the flow came back again, and so I'm in the state of, it's here, and then it disappears, and then it comes back, and then it's gone again, So I'm moving towards the end of my perimenopausal stage, and have found so many helpful practices to navigate it more easily, and have led lots of one-on-one clients through that journey, and now doing that more with groups, which is really fun, because then we get the collective wisdom that arises when working, in a community, which is really inspiring and supports motivation and accountability. So right now I'm working mainly on supporting women through the boosting of libido, right? So not just the perimenopausal journey and such, but specifically to boosting libido in a wholesome way, in a way that feels good and is peaceful and loving and compassionate. So we're talking a lot about sensuality nowadays. And what's really, what I found really interesting, Veronica, is in the last year or two, as I've been digging into this more deeply with groups, what I'm finding is folks who are practicing Ayurveda are pretty used to talking about poop, right? We talk about poop pretty often, right? It's like your certificate of completion from the day before, like it lets us know what's going on with the gut and how well things are being processed. Yeah. So a lot of folks have become comfortable talking about regularity and consistency and habits, routines around the bowel movements. And yet those same folks often are not comfortable talking about libido. So we can talk about poop, but not libido yet, And I think that that's a really interesting truth right now. That's been my experience, is there's been a comfort around talking about digestion and elimination. It's just become part of the conversation. But sensuality and libido has not yet really become part of the conversation. Perimenopause and menopause, and that transition, that life transition, has started to become much more of a common conversation. I just watched an episode on Masterclass, which, by the way, for listeners, if you don't already have a subscription to Masterclass, I would encourage you to get it. It is a fantastic streaming platform, and they have a course on menopause. So I just watched that. It's really lovely, really wonderful. So the conversation of menopause is becoming more widespread, right? It's showing up on talk shows and many Ayurvedic practitioners, where you said right before we came on today, so many of us are in that perimenopausal, menopausal stage. A lot of the sort of second round of Ayurvedic teachers in the United States are in their perimenopausal stage right now. So it's becoming the conversation, but yet libido not necessarily part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And libido really is a way of assessing the state of health, right? It's a marker for what's going on with the ojas, which is the nectar of immunity, which happens to directly influence libido. And so I'm finding that I'm leading groups through gentle conversations around sensuality and libido. And along with that, lots of just fun, creative, nourishing practices to get it going again, to get, because once it's gone, it's not gone forever, friends. It's not gone forever. We can bring it back, and there's always hope. It's totally realistic to get those juices flowing again, but it does require from some very specific diet, lifestyle, self-care practices and habits to get it going again. So that's what's on my mind right now. A lot of work around ojas and libido boosting in wholesome, helpful, mature ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you find? I know. I love this conversation.
Yeah, tell me what do you think why is that folks are ready to talk about poop but not sensuality?
Well, so it's funny when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the classical text, and in the classical text, there's no conversation about female libido at all, really anywhere in the classical text. It's all about male libido, but that was because the classical texts were written by males. So, okay, that's all right. But then when you go and look up menopause as a pathology, as I did when I started going through perimenopause, because I was like, what the hell is happening? I'm on fire 24 hours a day, bursting into flames. This is bullshit. What do I do? And Dr. Anisha was like, the ship has sailed. Like, what you could have done is gone. You can't really do anything at this point, and stop looking for it as a pathology. You're not going to find it because it's not a pathology.
It's not a pathology, yeah.
Or it's not supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because of these modern lives we've lived and the kind of disdain for the menstrual cycle and how it's either obliterated entirely or ignored, at best it's ignored, right? At worst, they're given medications where it just doesn't happen. Or when people have menstrual cycles that are problematic, they're not addressed. They're like, that's normal. Just take an Advil and carry on. And when none of that is addressed, then we end up having to pay the piper when we go through a menopausal transition.
Yeah.
And so I think that's hard for people. And then I think from an Ayurvedic perspective, like, we don't talk about sex other than for procreation. So even though sensuality, I agree with you, libido, all of it is incredibly intrinsic to our overall health, happiness, and general satisfaction of life. So we can't go on keeping ignoring it, even if we're past the point where we're going to be having children, because it's a way of enkindling the compassion and love for yourself, for your relationships, for whatever, wherever your path is, my husband, or if you've got a different relationship structure, then it's part and parcel of that. And there are so many different ways of being intimate, but we don't talk about it in the context of Ayurveda. And I think the classical texts were written in a time when things were really puritanical and things like that weren't really brought to the forefront. So I don't think we're ever taught in Ayurvedic studies how to even think about that.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Big gap in that for us.
So once again, you are at the forefront of a whole chapter of Ayurveda that needs to be almost written. And so the work you're doing is incredibly salient for where we're at as modern women and men too. But I think it's more apropos for women because we tend to be told, well, you're going to dry up in all ways and just that's it. And I don't think that's not true. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the transition happens for folks, different times. A lot of women begin perimenopause in their early 40s. I started around 41. And when there's a shift in the regularity of the flow and beginning to have some changes in the skin, the hair, the weight, moods, energy levels, things like that, sleep habits and such. So often it's early 40s, but for some, perimenopause doesn't even start until 50-ish, so there's a big range there. And then the transition into menopause, when there's been a full year, really a full year without the flow, and then we get into that postmenopausal stage. For some, that happens in the 40s, late 40s, and others, it can be late 50s, right? So there's a big, a couple of decades there where there's a lot of recalibration going on in the body, right? And the same kind of thing happens for men too, actually starting in their 30s. So andropause, when there's this transition of their hormones and testosterone levels, that begins, and they have often a few decades of recalibration too, right? So for all genders, all gender identities, we go through a life stage transition. There's a life stage transition from essentially the pitta stage, the active years of life, into the vata stage, the wisdom years of life. And that can be a rough transition, and often, unfortunately, is a rough transition for many. But it certainly can be done with more grace and ease and comfort and even celebration and enjoyment. But what we often talk about with the Ayurvedic approach to boosting sensuality and libido is one of the main concepts in Ayurveda that's incredibly important at this stage, which is when life is complex or complicated, the remedy is to simplify. And so moving through perimenopause, menopause, and andropause, the system is shifting big time. Hormones are shifting. The body's trying to figure out its new way. It's being cooked into a new state of being. It's just like puberty, right? Just on the other side. And so as the system is recalibrating, oftentimes people are also experiencing kind of those smooshed years, the sandwich years of like taking care of kids and pets, getting promotions, focusing more on their career, having more responsibility in the workplace, maybe taking care of aging parents, often experiencing loss of loved ones, peers, those are the years where we start to lose people more, right? And so life can be really overwhelming. And having life be really overwhelming, plus having this hormonal transition and recalibration, like that's a whole lot on the plate. And so, again, no matter what the gender identity, this is an opportunity to try to simplify whenever possible. So eating mindfully, taking quiet walks in nature, driving silently, sometimes not putting on anything and just giving the ears and the brain a break, going for a gentle jog and not putting on a podcast or something like that. Just actually having some recovery time and downtime, saying no to extra responsibilities, creating more space in the schedule so everything's not so jam-packed. That's been, for me, one of the most essential practices for me moving through perimenopause has been saying no and doing less, which, like, as a fiery Pitta Virgo New Yorker governed by Saturn, is not an easy thing to do. I used to say yes to everything. My schedule was jammed. I mean, just from my 20s when I was, a controller and a department chair and teaching 3 evening classes a week. And I mean, it was just, I've been like that forever. But nowadays it's different. Like, it just has to be. I've learned to say no. I put lots of buffer days around my trips when I travel to teach. I used to do like drive-bys. I'd fly to Tampa the day that my workshop would start and roll into the classroom and unfold a bunch of curriculum, 3 full packed days, and then fly home in the first flight and then go right into another thing.
Oh, I remember you like rolling into Kripalu, like, where have you been? I just got in from Florida and let's go teach. Like, wait a minute. Like, take a breath.
I could not take a breath in those active Pitta years. I could not do it. But when my body started shifting into perimenopause, it demanded it because I was experiencing weight gain. I was noticing my skin shift. I was losing more hair. I was having trouble sleeping. My period is, still pretty irregular right now. I was having lots of shifts in energy and clarity. And so I got really serious with myself about like, how do I want to live this stage of life? Mm-hmm. And what it really demanded, Veronica, was putting the yamas and niyamas to the test. Like, as a yogini, to really practice ahimsa, which is the first step in the path of yoga. What does ahimsa mean? What does non-harming mean in the years of perimenopause? And that's really the question that changed my habits and the way that I structure my work and my life now. It's like, okay, ahimsa really means for me prioritizing sleep and getting quiet time and being in nature and not overpacking my schedule and living more simply so that I don't have to work as hard, right? Like all those little choices, moving to Vermont from Washington, D.C., which was a very different life back then, And so it really demanded making some big life changes and a lot of little life changes. And so that's a lot of the inquiry that goes into boosting libido and boosting ojas, which is the nectar of both, we could say, libido and immunity, kind of in a general way. And changing kind of bigger habits and schedule choices will help get the juices back and protect the juices and like get the mood flowing. And and there's 1,000, much more fun and exciting things that we do for boosting libido. But like, that's kind of the big structure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the juices flowing. It's like, not to compare us to machinery, but the analogy rings true. It's like your machine only has so much lubrication to run. And if you're running it on all these other things that are using up all that lubrication, by the time you get to wherever else you want to be, you're empty. The tank is empty. The juices are gone. You've got no more fuel. You've got no more lubrication. None of it's there. And so if you're used up, and this goes for everything, not just libido, it's like if that ojas is gone, if you're running on empty, if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, if you're yelling at the cat for being a cat, right? Like, then you've stretched too thin, and now you have to look at that, and you have to, right? Yoga's the art of tolerating the consequences of being ourselves. I would say Ayurveda is as well. So it's like, okay, so you did that. Now what do you do? Well, it's information, right? Just like, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's like, okay, so now you know what happens. What do you do with that? If you're not satisfied, you have to make a change, right?
And doing that in a group is often easier, like where we're all talking about some of the foundational practice. So like in my 6-week virtual course, we are going to, I teach about superfoods for libido and aphrodisiac recipes, rasayanas, which help to boost the ojas back up, vajikaranas, which are more aphrodisiac appropriate. But we also do lots of work with daily hydration and like really committing to that, oleation of the skin, both internal and external oleation, with good quality oils, ghee, things like that. We focus on logging more sleep and all of the habits that have to happen in order to get more sleep. And so like shutting down the tech, eating dinner earlier, lowering the lights in the house earlier at night, getting into pajamas earlier, like doing things like that, like all the little things that make the sleep routine actually happen, in a consistent way to log those hours of sleep. We focus on practices that help to reduce stress, and shake off some of the stressors that we experience. And that's sort of a 3-part process. Like, how do we prevent stress from building in the beginning? How do we manage stress in the moment? And then how do we recover from stressful events? And so there's like a 3-pronged approach essentially to working with stress, because stress is a huge zapper of ojas, and that juice, that nectar that keeps us fit, So stress reduction, stress management, stress recovery is a big part of this 6-week course. Reducing toxins that come in to the system. So reducing like packaged foods, alcohol, coffee, sugary things, or even like we enjoy giving aphrodisiacs, like it's pretty good. But there are lots of things that we often take in that are not helpful to the system, that are drying or toxifying. So we do over 6 weeks, changing habits around that, as well as impressions for the mind. So like up-leveling the kinds of entertainment choices that we make, to watch things that are uplifting and not exhausting, to listen to things that are empowering and encouraging instead of disorienting or agitating. So changing entertainment choices, that's a habit pattern that we work with, and so many others. And then we talk about buying new lingerie and using aromatherapy and all these wonderful superfoods that we can use to boost libido. So that's all kind of like the fun, creative side. But without the fun, foundational self-care habits and routines and patterns, all that stuff doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to start at that beginning. You got to start at the base levels in order to lay that foundation so that you can support these other practices, these other adventures, let's call them, as you move forward in the program. When does this next program start?
The next one starts on January 23rd. So it's a 6-week course, and it's each Thursday night from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I give 2 recipes to make and bring to the 2-hour class. So we eat our aphrodisiacs as a meal replacement for dinner that night. We eat the aphrodisiacs while I give lecture on different curriculum topics around libido boosting and such. And lots of community time, breakout rooms, getting to know each other, and lots of fun, creative assignments every week. I'm a teacher at heart. And so, that's first and foremost what I do is teach. And so there are assignments. Yeah, there are homework assignments, but they're fun and nourishing. And there's, breath work that's done in the training, and mindfulness practices and all sorts of fun activities. So that starts in January. I'll be doing a masterclass to prepare for that on January 9th, which is going to be all about ojas and talking about this nectar of immunity that relates to libido, and really digging into like, what is ojas? Where is it? How do we deplete it? How do we boost it back up? So I'm going to talk all about that in the masterclass. And then I also have a free ebook that is kind of the entryway into looking at sensuality and libido. And so that's just a free download. Folks can get that today and start the journey of self-inquiry and a compassionate approach to gently and sustainably kind of getting the juices going again. Yeah.
Amazing. And we'll link to all of that in the show notes. So those of you that are listening, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get to be able to experience the full Larissa experience. We'll have links to all of those things. So I have a couple of ending questions. And one of them is from Mona Warner, who is my best friend and who you know quite well. And so she once had a friend of hers that got a driver's license under a different name just to see if she could. And she wanted to know if you've ever done anything just to see if you could do it.
It's a great question. The answer is, of course, like too many to consider.
Which one do you want to pick?
Well, okay, so what's jumping into my head is I spent a semester abroad. Well, actually not abroad. It felt like abroad because it was New Orleans, which felt to me like a different country. Yeah. So I did a semester at LSU when I was in college, and did the semester of Mardi Gras and Jazz Festival, of course, the spring semester. And it was the best semester of college ever. And what I ended up spending a lot of time doing during that semester was going to concerts and trying to get into concerts for free, and getting into concerts for free and getting back into the green room, getting VIP passes back there. And a lot of that was like, can I do this? If I put my mind to it, can I do it? And one of the times Dave Matthews Band was playing in New Orleans, and I was in Baton Rouge, and they were coming, and it's going to be a huge stadium show. And they were sold. They were expensive. I was broke in college, and I really wanted to go to that show, and I wanted to get backstage, wanted to meet Dave Matthews. I was collecting autographs and lanyards and stuff. So I kept trying to win tickets on the radio. There was a sweepstakes or whatever. And I didn't win, but I kept calling the radio station. And I was like, okay, listen, I recognize you've given away the tickets, but can you, because they were based in Baton Rouge. So I was like, can you give me a ride to New Orleans? Because like, I don't have a car, whatever. Like, how am I going to get, I'll buy scout tickets outside, whatever. And they took pity on me, and they gave me a ride to New Orleans, to the stadium. And I was hanging around, like checking out whether I could get some tickets beforehand. I wasn't having a lot of luck. And right before the show started, the folks from the radio station gave me a couple of the comps because some of their pals weren't showing up and going to take them. And so like, they gave me 2 tickets, one of which I scalped because I was there by myself. So I made like $25 or something too. And then I got in and I got to see the show. And then afterwards, I like before the show totally ended, I left the stadium and I went around to where the tour buses were. And I was hanging out by the green room space. I was like, think I can, talking to the bouncers, I think I can get back there. And sure enough, they took pity on me and they let me go back. And I got to spend the evening hanging out in the green room with Dave Matthews and the band and stuff. And I was so high off of that experience, naturally high off of that experience. Like after that, yes, I was 19. I was so excited. And everything was lining up. And it was like, it just gave me this sense of like, oh, if I put my mind to anything that's positive and non-harmful, like if I put my mind to anything, like I could do it. Yeah. So I have many more stories just like that.
I bet you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing and smiling so much because we have this in common. Because so what people probably don't know, my father is a rock and roll musician. So I grew up around rock and roll musicians all the time. And and also my cousin used to do lights for big name acts like Hall & Oates and Billy Joel and all of these things. So my first concert was Hall & Oates. And because my cousin was doing the lights, I got to just go back and meet them and get my hat signed and like all this stuff. And I'm like 10 years old, 11 years old. And so I just thought that's what you did. And sure enough, I think my next concert, we got to go backstage. And then I went to see Billy Joel and we got to go backstage. And so then I grew up into be 19, 20. And so I would just go to shows and just walk backstage like I own the place and no one ever questioned me, right? It's a pitta thing. People just assume we're supposed to be wherever we are and they assume we're in charge of something usually. But yeah, so similar. Like I would just go, whatever, we get to go backstage. Like that's what we do.
That's exactly what the lesson that I learned was like, you just go back like you
just do it.
I learned to not just kind of wait around and beg my way in. It was just like, I'm here.
Yeah. I have arrived. Aren't you lucky?
Very pitta. I'm not surprised that we were both doing that thing. Yeah. You just show up and that's it. Yeah. Own the place.
It, exactly.
Yeah. Hall & Oates. Oh man, I would have loved that. Yeah.
It was the best. It was the best. Oh my God, which totally kills my current goth card, right? Like, oh yeah. I also went to see Susie and the Banshees, just so we're all clear, and Bauhaus and Depeche Mode. Like, got to level the field there.
You have to level the field.
Exactly. It's not just all yacht rock, my friends.
But, it does speak to like those bigger things of like life may, and for listeners, like life may feel ho-hum right now, or you might feel underwater. You might feel overwhelmed, spread too thin, exhausted, like over it, fed up, upset, angry, sorrowful, regretful. And we all go through phases like that. Sometimes they're long phases, but anything can change. Right? When we put attention in a different direction, if we put it on something wholesome, positive, uplifting, empowering, good-natured, then things do change. So I want to encourage folks to don't forfeit your power to improve your life. Never. Don't ever forfeit your power to improve your life. It can always change, and it can become so much more fun and exciting and fulfilling than you could imagine right now, right? You just make one little change and the whole trajectory shifts. And that's true, right? It's true.
Yeah, it's so true. So true. So the final question, and the question we ask all of our guests here at the How to Take Care of Yourself podcast is, what have you learned from the food that you eat?
Well, the food becomes my physical body temporarily, right? Everything's temporary. Nothing lasts except the spirit. So the food becomes the body. And right now, the way the food is being grown is, generally speaking, not optimal, right? And so as it's all a cycle, right? So the more that we care for the planet and the earth and our environment and our neighborhoods and our homes, like the more we care for the planet, the more nourishing the food can be. And then that's going to nourish the body, and it goes through this cycle. But if we do things that are sort of like take care of the body and oil ourselves with Abhyanga oil and take in lots of Tulsi tea and all these like wonderful nourishing things, but then we throw lots of toxins into the environment, that doesn't end well for Mother Earth. Like Drano down the drain and things that are poisoning the planet, yeah? And so that stuff is steeping into our nourishment. And so I want to invite folks to consider how they can up-level products that they use, companies they give money to, the ways that we can, on small and big levels, take better care of the earth so that we can be nourished and nourish others in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So leaning into your local resources, like if you have a farm nearby, go support your farm. The food possibly costs a little more, but it's going to be so much more nourishing across the board. And if you don't have a farm near you, when you go to the grocery store, just try to make choices that are supportive to your local agriculture or your agricultural on a more national level, right? Really looking like if there are local options at your local grocery store, maybe lean towards those rather than buying the bigger brands that are being shipped in from across the globe. Really paying attention to, kind of voting with your dollar with buying organic or looking to buy non-GMO or any of those things that feel like they align with what you're talking about there.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes a difference. It does.
Totally does. Yeah. Tastes better too, from a chef's perspective. Like there's no, like you give me an organic carrot and a non-organic carrot, I'm going to be able to tell you which one it is every single time.
Every time. Yeah.
Every time. It's like night and day. Yeah. It's wild. And then if local up the street versus one from the grocery store, like no contest. I always know one tastes like candy and the other one tastes like cardboard.
And we're lucky that organic is becoming more accessible. We can find it in big grocery stores and not just health food stores and farmers markets. And so that's encouraging too, because that makes it more accessible and more affordable for a lot of folks. Yeah.
Any final thoughts or bits of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners, Larissa?
oh, now I want to like wiggle my way into another concert. That's like the only thing on my mind right now. It's like, what concert is coming up that
I would love, I want to go to a Vampire Weekend concert with you. I think we would have an uproariously good time at that concert, you and I bet you we could get backstage.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be a contest. We would just do it.
No,
right?
two of us together, you kidding? They wouldn't know what hit them. These two girls, they run the venue.
This is the thing with my whole life is like, people just keep putting me in charge of things, you know? Like, I never apply to jobs or, you know, seek promotions or whatever. Like, people just put me in charge of stuff and like over and over again. That's my whole life story with my career. And so, yeah, it'd be easy enough to just show up on a venue site and, you know, just be put in charge of something.
Oh my gosh, too funny.
Yeah.
But
so folks, you know, folks listening, life is short, isn't it? So savor it. Yeah. It's time to break the stuckness and the things that hold us back from thriving and like living life and savoring it. It's not going to be perfect, not always going to be ideal, but we can really savor it. So let this be a little sign to do just that. Play.
Awesome.
Play more.
Play.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. Lila. Right? Lila. I love that. Oh, Larissa, thank you so much for having this conversation and being here with us today. It's been just such a pleasure and an honor to be with you today.
So fun to see you. I miss seeing you in person. I wish I could give you a big squeeze, but it's wonderful to be able to be here through technology and to share with you and your listeners. Yeah, sending you big love, Veronica.
Right back at you. And we'll have you back to talk of your concert adventures.
Race cars, we could talk about that.
Oh, that's right. That's another thing we have in common. Creepy. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so that was today's episode. And if you've made it this far, I want to congratulate you. That was a long episode and you made it all the way through. So as a congratulatory gesture, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That helps us to bring you more content like this, which allows us to bring you things that feel very useful. And that's what my goal here is to bring you the most useful content I possibly can, talking to experts in the field to really make sure that you find information that feels not just useful, but actionable. So I hope you took something away from today's conversation that you're going to start on today. And I hope you'll hit that like button and the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you this sort of content. I am so glad you are here today, friends. And if no one else tells you, remember, I love you and I'm convinced of your capacity to continue crafting a life worth living. Thank you so much for being here, friends. We'll see you next time.